Okay, so that's kind of the theory. When it comes to the practice, from a practical perspective, think of it this way. If you want to become proficient in your asana and your pranayama, what do you have to do? Practice every day. Right? And then you take one day off here or there, whatever. But you practice every day. If you want to become proficient in your hatha yoga practice, once a month I go to a class. Or once a week I might, do 20, 30 minutes. Nothing will happen. You'll stay flat. So it is, if we want to become proficient in our objectivity, we must practice on a daily basis. So the practice is to take a text which is an exposition or a definition or a description or a discussion of these higher values. Right? So the word that we sometimes use to describe such a text is a scripture. So scripture normally has this connotation of being a religious document, and by and large most of the scriptures we know about are. But it's not purely the purview of religion. Vedanta is a philosophy. The texts that make it up, the Vedas, the Upanishads, they don't belong to any religion. They are a scripture because they are describing these higher values. This text here that all of this knowledge is drawn from, everything we've discussed in these last 4 weeks, it's all come from one chapter in this book. You could quite rightfully call this a scripture. So what it means is you take a text that is describing these higher values, and then you question it. With that sense of humility, with that sense of devotion, you take nothing for granted. Don't believe any of it. Have an open mind, but don't believe any of it until you've gone through that process of saying, now, what's he saying here? So you go through a paragraph. What's this paragraph saying? Read it. Read it again. Read it again. Read one sentence. Stop. Do I know what all of these terms mean? He's used the word selfishness here. Now, I think I know what selfishness means, but what does he mean in this context? He's used the word intellect. What is intellect? He's used the word mind. What is mind? So we've got to make sure that we're digging in as deeply as possible. So studying has got nothing to do with the amount of study, in terms of the length of the study, the number of texts. It's all about the depth. So the academy where I studied, I went there in 2006. There are 11 books in the course. I've been studying those same 11 books for the last 11 years. Over and over and over again. Because there is depth. It doesn't matter how many books you read. You can read 1,000 books, nothing will happen. You can read one book, but if you read for depth, then you will drag all of this knowledge. True knowledge, as he says, true knowledge arises out of an internal discipline of reflection and contemplation of the eternal truths. So when you go deep into the text, we're dragging that out of it. So that's what we do. We question it. Try to understand what is being said. Reflect upon it. Look for contradictions. Dissent. Question it. Look at it from different perspectives. Try to create your own metaphors. A really good way to study, imagine that you're sitting in front of somebody else and they have just read the paragraph that you're looking at, and they turn to you and say, hey, this paragraph, I don't get it. What's he saying here? Imagine yourself explaining it to that person. Oh, okay, so he says true knowledge arises out of da da da. So when he uses the word knowledge, imagine you're trying to explain it to another person. What this will do, it'll locate those areas where you go, where you stick. You're not quite sure, you haven't really got it. Right, that's the point. Now dig in there. What have I not really understood? So by doing this, we are doing two things. One is that we are exercising the intellect, because it is the intellect which questions. So we're enhancing our capacity for questioning, for discriminative thinking. That we take everywhere. Right? So we're distinguishing intelligence from intellect. Intelligence is highly compartmentalized. I have a huge amount of intelligence when it comes to biotechnology. Ask me anything, I can answer it all. But ask me anything about literature, I have no idea. Gotha? Who's Goth? I've got no idea who the person is. So, whereas intelligence is highly compartmentalized, very specific, intelligence is you take it everywhere with you when you go. So think of it this way, you go to the gym, you do specific exercises, you gain strength, you gain flexibility. You take that strength with you everywhere. You're carrying your shopping home, you take that strength with you. You're walking up the stairs, you take it with you. You're standing at your workplace for 3 hours connecting widgets to widgets, you're taking that strength with you. It's universally applicable. Same with the intellect. As you develop your capacity for critical thinking, everywhere you go, you develop it. You can take it with you. And so when you start to notice it, when you hear people speaking, when you start to have conversations, when you watch debates on television, you can just immediately stick your finger on the point. You know, wrong reasoning, flawed assumptions, taking for granted, conflating two ideas. It becomes child's play to you. You know, when you're in a maze, you've got no way out. But if you're just 10 feet above that maze, aha, that's how you get out. So developing the intellect is this way of rising above. Right? So this is one of the things that's happening. We're developing our capacity for independent thinking, critical reasoning. The second thing that's happening is exactly what we described. As you think, so you become. So the more you reflect upon these higher values, and you say, aha, yes, I can see, I got it. Selfishness does make you miserable. A selfish attitude in life is ruining my relationships. You're changing your beliefs, you're changing your values. So this is the first aspect, is that daily study and reflection on higher values. Preferably in the early morning hours, as early as possible. So at the academy, it's beautifully set up. Right? You don't shop, you don't cook, you don't even do your own washing. You know, it's perfectly set up just for you to study. After lunch, in the schedule, nap time. There's a schedule for every moment of the day between 2 o'clock and 3:30, sleep. So that you can get up at 4:30 in the morning and spend that first hour and a half of the day studying. Now, not easy for people who are not in that kind of environment. You've got lots of other pressures. So the idea, what we generally say is, whatever time you get up, if you want to implement this studying as a regular practice, make it, say, an hour earlier. Get up, scrub the sleep out of your eyes, grab a coffee, whatever. Sit down, 45 minutes, just read. Make notes of questions. Summarize the text. Make bullet points there. 45 minutes, done. Close the book, go and do the rest of your day. So the reason that we do it in the early morning hours is because that's when the mind and intellect are at their most conducive. They're calmest. As the day starts to kick into its natural activities, we start to think, okay, I've got to do this and this and this and this. The mind gets more extroverted. In those early morning hours, you're naturally more introverted. And so it's more conducive for studying. So that's the first aspect, is studying. The second aspect of practice is to directly implement that. So whatever value that you are reflecting upon, that you're starting to see might have some truth to it, experiment with it. Try to put it into practice in daily life. So let's stay with this other example. Selfishness breeds agitation, unselfishness breeds mental peace. Okay, seems to make sense, but I'm still not convinced. Let's try it. And so you make a concerted effort, a goal for yourself. Every time I go into an environment, every time I go into a circumstance, every person I meet, the first thing I'm going to think before I open my mouth is, what can I offer? What does this situation need? And can I provide it? Sincerely, it doesn't, not just a mechanical practice of repeating a mantra. You genuinely want to be able to offer something of value to that circumstance. That's unselfishness. So you try it out. Give yourself a 30-day trial. Give yourself a 30-day challenge. Right? And so you practice it. and see what happens. What happens to my mental state? What happens to my sleeping? What happens to my relationships? And so what happens when we do this is that we will start to see the validity of the ideas if it's there. If there's no validity to the ideas, then we won't see the effect. But if we start genuinely trying to practice unselfishness, and we do see a change in our mental state, I get to sleep better. My relationships seem more natural and less perfunctory. They seem more real and authentic. I seem more connected to other human beings. My God, it works. Then we're more convinced. And that gives us a further conviction. Right now, what else has this text got to say? So it's like two pedals to a wheel. So it's studying and implementing the practice. As we do this, we are becoming what we are thinking about. And it telescopes into this constant awareness of I. Who am I? Who am I anyway? I'm a woman. Am I a woman? My body's a woman. I'm a daughter. Well, my body's a daughter, I suppose. My mind has a relationship with my parents as a daughter. Who am I? Who am I really? This question, this constant reflection, it just becomes in the back of the mind. And it's not something that we, crowbar into our awareness. It's not it's not forced. Think of it this way, the example that we used, I think we might have used this example earlier. Yeah, when we're talking about the ideal. When you are on holiday, you get on the tour bus, and the tour bus takes you to a destination, and as you're filing off the bus, the tour guide says, now remember, you have to get back to the hotel, the bus leaves here at 6. So you go out into the tourist destination. Go to the beach, you go to the movie, you go to the market, you go to the museum, you go to the yoga class. What's the one thing that's constantly just in the back of your mind? The bus leaves at 6. That's the quality of that awareness. We're not forcing ourselves to remember the bus leaves at 6. It's just a natural thing that sits in the background. It doesn't disturb our activities, but a little bit of our psychological bandwidth is just being spent on that thing. Who am I? Who am I? I. What is this I? We're starting to identify with it. We start to become it, and we get freedom from whatever the body, mind, and intellect does. And that freedom is the goal of yoga.